If you're a business owner without insurance, you're setting yourself up for potential disaster. Today, I'm joined with Geoff Sokol, our private wealth advisor at GT Investment Management. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tim. As a disclaimer, please remember, guys, if you hear anything that sounds exciting or attractive in the conversation that we're about to have here, please do remember to consult a financial advisor or a professional insurance broker or consultant, someone who has the subject matter expertise and is a fiduciary that is going to be able to provide you with personalized and unique advice. Please follow up with them.
I'm very excited to talk about insurance products, and I know sometimes it's a boring topic, but as a business owner and a management consultant, we love making sure our clients are always buttoned up. That's our term, and just making sure that they're prepared and ready to go out and do what they do best, which is run their business and not have to worry about these things in the background that could potentially pull them down in these situations that do occur. Unfortunately, bad situations occur from time to time. You want to make sure you're bulletproof when those times come.
Yeah, we use the term boring here. It's kind of a term of endearment. Slow and steady wins the race, and unfortunate, that's another good adjective to use as well. The fastest way to drain your assets and make your balance sheet go from hero to zero, as unfortunate as it is something comes up, you're not prepared for it. All these rules and regulations that you never even thought existed, and then boom, you get hit with a fine that you can't pay, and sayonara.
In your wheelhouse here, talking about various insurance products, when you think about the first product that comes to mind, what is like a first good product for a business owner to have?
Yeah, so you can get into the nitty gritty, which I'm sure we will get deeper into it. But first things first, you would want to make sure that you have a business owner's policy, which is a basic business liability policy that is going to protect against any harm that could result from the products and services that you do offer. So we would start there with a business owner policy. It's going to depend on what type of business that you have. So, if you provide a service like housing, for example, then you're going to want to make sure that anything that could result, any bodily harm or injury or anything that could come up, like someone could trip and fall on a sidewalk, for example, and you might think, hey, that's an issue with the city, or they should have had better sneakers. But it's just one of these things where the first thing you should do is get with a professional who specializes in that industry and have them assess the risks that are prevalent or that could be present there. And then you're just going to, go line by line to figure out which coverages you want to have, how much it's going to protect you. And you could think of it a little bit like auto insurance, where you start with understanding I need to have auto insurance for my vehicle. It's a requirement. And then you start going into the different types of coverage. If you get hit by someone who doesn't have insurance, or if you cause the accident, or if you're the one who is the recipient of the accident, and it breaks down into all these different subsets and categories. So you would really want to start with a professional who can assess your business and then determine the needs based on the risks that you might have in your specific industry.
Yeah, the BOP policy, business owner policy, is kind of like, I agree. It's step one, whatever business you're getting into, making sure you're buttoned up at that level, working with an insurance provider, insurance broker, trying to get the best rate, but really not moving forward until you have that in place, because things do happen and you want to make sure that you have coverage.
And the BOP is, of course, it's a good place to start. And since you say that, it does get me thinking. It's really just your jumping off point. From there, there's another policy, the CGL, which is a commercial general liability policy, and this is going to be able to support you with the legal and defense costs or any private settlement or arbitration that may result. So this is a common mistake you might make, is I have my BOP, my business owner policy, so if something happens, I'm protected. Well, yes, when you get to the point of an actual settlement being reached, but to actually fund the legal costs and the court fees and everything else that comes with it, that's when you need to start tacking on additional policies to be able to support.
Yeah, and I agree that it's not a one size fits all, because there are different types of businesses, service businesses versus businesses that are equipment heavy and have various liabilities. So you got to ensure that you're not just saying this isn't just auto insurance, right? It has to be covered appropriately. Yeah. What other
Sure.
policies come to mind?
Well, we should mention an umbrella policy. It's not something that is typically going to be considered something a business owner should have. So here's another one where I would say, make sure you're working with a good insurance consultant or a good wealth advisor who's going to be like the quarterback for you to be uh, maintaining these relationships and finding the best services and fits for you. So it's possible, not always possible, but it can be that if you go past your deductible and past your liability coverages, that an umbrella would be something that could support it. But in any event, I would say, you want to have an umbrella policy for your personal finances. And if it can also support anything that comes up on the business side of things, then that's just the cherry on top.
Right, right. And what about policies that protect business owners from piercing the corporate veil, as they say? What comes to mind? Because I know as a business owner, working with a lot of business owners, everyone's always concerned with how do I make sure that the business is held liable and this doesn't jump over the fence and affect me, my personal finances, my assets, my home. Can I lose my home if things go sideways? And this is where we always start the insurance conversation. But the insurance
Sure.
conversation, as you're mentioning, is a big, broad conversation. And making sure people know where to get started first and then how to protect their personal assets from this.
That's a really, really great point. Just that you have these insurance coverages does not guarantee that you wouldn't be held personally liable. And that is another interesting dynamic here. We're working with your advisory team to figure out whether or not your business is established in the most efficient and optimized way. If you're a general partner, it's not the same as establishing a limited liability corporation, for example. So, to take a step back or to have it as part of the conversation about which insurance coverages you need, it may make sense to start looking at how you're organized, how the business is structured, and then that can get into a whole different thing where we like looking at whether it makes sense to reorganize in a different state, for example, for the tax benefits. We're
Yeah.
opening up something that we want to be able to dive into and really figure out what makes the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there's protection of yourself, of course, then there's protection of your partners, right? So if you have business partners or other primary stakeholders, shareholders that own over a certain percentage inside of the business, everyone needs to be protected and have, limited liability individually.
Sure.
Then as we're talking about things moving down towards the assets, so if I own assets, but maybe my kids also own those assets and someone's coming after us for those things, you want to make sure you're buttoned up. And even just having that peace of mind, knowing that, hey, I have good coverages, I can sleep at night, and again, I could just focus on the business. It's so important.
Of course, of course. And it gets dicey out there. Um, I hate to be cynical, but I think it helps to provide some examples, just so people really know that, it's a big crazy world out there. So one that comes to mind for me is I have a friend who does phenomenal Vietnamese cuisine. And this is kind of like an insider thing that, I only know this because I lived in Vietnam for so long, but a lot of the cuisine here in Southern California has a Southern flair to it. So we realized there's probably a big market if we did Northern style cuisine. And so she was doing extremely well. And, fast forward a little while, she gets an offer for her business to be bought out. And she doesn't accept, just thinking, I'm doing well. And this is kind of gets into a legal situation where we're not allowed to speculate what happened, but we think that the people that made the offer to buy out the restaurant sent some people there to make some complaints and may have had a type of like crony relationship with the people who do the inspections, the health folks, God bless them. And suddenly she was getting dinged with all these regulatory fines. The food wasn't cooked at the right temperature, and all this sort of stuff came up. And this is another thing where we keep using the phrase being buttoned up. If you know what liability is, if you have a really strong understanding of all these rules and regulations, you can fend this stuff off. But if you don't, then suddenly you're not serving your customers anymore. You're just figuring out how to deal with the law.
Yeah. No, and what's funny is most business owners know their sphere of influence very well. They know their
Mm-hmm.
specialty, their skill. So if you're the restaurateur and you know cooking, that's what you know. What do you know about insurance? What do you know about being, buttoned up in liability and the law, right? You know very little. So that's why I
Sure.
think it's so important that we put information like this out there and say, hey, business owners, flashing red light, make sure that you're always safe and secure as you can be. What
Exactly.
what do you think about keeping a war chest of sorts, of having a fund set aside for whenever situations do arise, even though that you may have insurance policies, but you're really having in your line item somewhere, carved out some expenses in the event that any of these things were to go sideways and need some additional capital.
Sure. Yeah, some guys call it the cost of doing business. Um,
Mhm.
some guys call it an emergency fund. In personal finance, we use the phrase emergency fund or a rainy day fund. And
Mhm.
yeah, this goes back to the conversation on planning, that you want to have capital expenditure and you want to be keeping track of when you do invest in the business, what is the return on equity or what is the return on that invested capital to make sure that you're allocating capital effectively and it's helping you to grow. So that would be one way that you're spending to scale your business operations and bring in more revenues. And then at the same time, some of that money should go into either a treasury or into this fund where you don't know what tomorrow holds. We can do a lot of financial planning and modeling and run data analytics to forecast what we think our expense will be. But yeah, when that big bill comes, you want to be able to pay it before it starts accruing interest. And that's just one of those things. In personal finance, we say anywhere from 3 to 6 months of your typical expenses is how much you should have on hand at any given time for your liquidity needs or emergencies. And you could make a case that it's more or less the same in business, but if anything, you would want to be more conservative and have more and more cash available because I hate to go down that whole rabbit hole of how crazy it can be when you end up in the courts, but it gets expensive and quickly. So, if you have the ability to put some cash away and to save it, and you can, businesses can invest too, you could be earning risk-free return in CDs or in the treasury market. So, you can put your cash to work and still have it available for liquidity need as it does come up. And that's an important piece of the financial planning, which we do with our consulting process for the businesses.
Yeah, that's a great point. Making sure that your rainy day fund is also accruing interest, right, and growing.
Sure.
Why not? Why not? What other products come to mind when we think about liability and insurance and things of that nature?
Yeah, so there are a couple that come to mind that I mentioned before. If we get into some of the more nuanced discussions, I've seen this one happen where, you kind of have this romantic idea of like guys like Zuckerberg working in their dorm room, or these guys like a local guy, Chet Pipkin, who's a Southern California guy who formed Belkin, the classic drop out of college, work in his garage. Jeff Bezos was the same way. When you're doing this, you have probably a couple of different people you're working with, and you think at the time, we're the founders of this company, we're going to be doing this forever. And if it works, great, but it's not always the case that it does. So there's two products you would need, which is these are a buy sell insurance and a key man or key woman policy. The way a buy sell works is if one of the founders becomes disabled or is unable to work for any reason, or in the worst case scenario, passes away, then the ability to buy out their share, that liquidity is accessible. And you could form some type of succession plan for how to deal with this. And it's just one of those things, sleeping peacefully at night, knowing if that were to happen, then there is a plan in place instead of some opportunistic private equity fund or, your competitors think, okay, here's our chance to pounce. And you barely have a chance to even grieve what may have just occurred. You're already trying to fend off someone from buying you out and getting majority ownership. So that is a very helpful one to have in place. And I should also mention, when you're, this example of the guys 18, 20 years old in the garage, they don't think they're ever going to become disabled. But recent data shows people in their 20s, as many as 1 in 4 of them will be disabled at some point in their working career before their retirement. So, 1 in 4 is decent enough odds that it's one of those things, sit down with your advisory team or your insurance consultant and just see, can you afford it? How to pay for it? Is it something you should have? And chances are, it's pretty cheap, it's pretty affordable, and you don't want to need it, but it's great to have when you do.
Yeah, yeah. And you had mentioned key man policy.
Hmm.
So let's go a little deeper in that.
Key man, similar. It's when one of the key employees. This doesn't necessarily have to be a founder. It just could be someone who's, monumentally important to the success of the business. You can take out a key man policy, and you can effectually what it is you're modeling the importance of this employee, and you're attaching some type of quantifiable revenue, or this person is worth this much money to the business. This is something you might have some experience with if you're working with a recruiting company, and they can explain the importance of their service, that if somebody leaves the firm, they have a quick replacement lined up who's got all the right skills, and that service is worth a lot of money to a lot of different businesses. So
Yeah.
imagine you have this key man policy or key woman. Um, this person either can no longer work, or in the worst case scenario were to take place, and they pass away. You want to know that you have this liquidity available as part of replacing all of that efficiency and effectiveness in your workplace, that you're never going to be taken out just by one unfortunate event taking place.
Yeah, and the common example I think people think about is if two or three partners are in the business and one of the partners is no longer there, maybe they're into extreme sports and something right happens, some insane thing happens, whatever. Because I've seen a lot of that. I spent a lot of years working in that industry, which is funny because everyone's doing these very extreme things. And people wanted policies on their partners, on their business owner, in case someone goes surfing one day and doesn't come back. But that's kind of like the more common bit. I think it's interesting that you mentioned it could be anyone in the company that has quantifiable value, someone that has like major importance. So maybe it's not just the partners, but it could be somebody in the C-suite or maybe a level down.
Absolutely. The cost to replace is always high,
Yeah.
at any level, any part of the company. So it's just one of those things that you can find a affordable coverage for it. It's likely something you would opt to do.
The takeaway here being that business owners should have insurance, they should be buttoned up, and that there's not a one size fits all when it comes to insurance. There's varying degrees, varying levels, varying types, and based upon your business, you're going to want to work with a broker or an insurance provider that knows the nuances of your business so that you're always taken care of. Also, knowing that the world isn't a perfect place and things do happen to good people, and even though you have the best intentions and are trying to keep yourself healthy and whatnot, which you should, things can still happen. So making sure that you're taken care of in that arena is that the good summation of this?
So we have covered business liability policies, the CGL, and then we kind of group together key man and buy sell, but let's call those our top three. Um, Health insurance is our honorable mention here, which maybe doesn't seem like the most obvious one as far as protecting the business, but we have talked about optimizing the business and being as efficient as you can be. And we've talked about how a buy sell or a key man agreement is protecting you against having to replace a really important employee. So think of health insurance as another way to establish a lot of credibility from the hiring perspective when you're talking to new employees, and you can tell them, here are the coverages we offer. And then you can start to have this conversation with your new staff that if you're a family of four, and if you go to the doctor often, we recommend this policy. If you're younger, healthier, and you can't remember the last time you even visited the doctor, not that we recommend that, but it might make sense to be on this type of plan. And it just establishes a lot of credibility, it makes people feel comfortable. It can be a really great way to retain staff, because when you offer really great benefits, it's just one of those reasons to stick around and make a career out of it, especially these days where when you see CVs, it's rare that you see someone without 10 different experiences. They were here for 1 year, here for 2 years, here for 1 year. Really rare that you see someone who's done 10 or 20 years with a company. And just think of all the value that you get as a business owner when you can retain your staff for that amount of time.
And it's a tax write-off.
I was going to say also, you're getting yourself into that lower bracket.
Yeah.
You can run the models here and see that not only are you making your staff happy, you're deferring that tax liability, or you're minimizing that tax liability, and
Yeah.
what's not to love?
Yeah, what's not to love? No, it's such a great point. It's a qualitative point and a quantitative point, but we often think about, the key man and the bops and the general liabilities, right? That's kind of like the nature of the beast, but it's funny to bulk in health insurance. It's such an obvious, it's like right in front of your face, and you can do more. And as an employee retention tool, and I mean, without even mentioning your own personal health and just making sure you have easy access. And again, another one of those things that help you sleep at night. I kind of feel like the theme here is how do business owners sleep better at night? And it's just simply by making sure that you're taken care of.
And who wouldn't want to get 8 peaceful, restful hours of sleep? You're going to
Exactly.
be more effective, better friend, better spouse, better employee. It's just, being buttoned up is going to allow you to take that next step and break through any break points or thresholds that are holding you back. And just to make one more point on this health insurance concept, I think it's really relatable to imagine that you're in the hiring chair and you get this onboarding paperwork, and who knows what you're going through at that point in your life, that you're switching jobs or you're in between, and you start trying to pencil in which options to take. And you're not an expert at that. I'm not an expert at
Right,
that.
right.
um, you get all these offers and all these different names and numbers. So another thing to think about is when you have a really deep, thorough understanding of the coverages that you're offering, to be able to suggest a high deductible health plan to someone so that they can open up a health savings account, and then you can model it out how to put cash deductible or tax deductible contributions into that. It's just the sort of thing that you get that fantastic onboarding experience for an employee. And we don't need to beat a dead horse here, but it's just another thing that's going to make it a great company to work for. And that's the greatest thing you can provide as a business owner.
Absolutely. Turnover is expensive. And when we've worked with clients that have, hundreds and thousands of employees, you're looking at high, even a 10-20% turnover rate. I mean, that you're just hiring tons of employees every single year. And anything you can do to reduce that need to, turnover and recruit and hiring, it's just so expensive, laborious. It takes a lot of mental energy as well as physical strain. So anything we recommend to employers that can do to keep your talent longer, keep the right talent longer, to make yourself more attractive and more competitive in the market, you should do it. So on top of taking care of your own personal well-being and making sure you can have a good night's sleep, making sure your employees can also have a good night's sleep, it doesn't fall on deaf ears and it goes a long way.
Absolutely. Very
Yeah.
well said.
Well, very cool. I'm excited we had a chance to even briefly talk about insurance here, the fun, boring topic, we'll call it, because I think it's so important for business owners. If you're new to this channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to continue to talk about subjects like this with our good folks here at growthink. Geoff, thanks again, and we'll put your contact information down below.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And to anyone out there who says, this is great, but I'm glad I already have all of my insurance coverages accounted for. Hey, good for you. If you ever need a second opinion or just want a couple of us to take another look at it, we'd be happy to do so.